Hey guys, my name is Jess, also known as ZeraCat, and I will be your guest tutor for today. Thank you so much to Joel for inviting me on. A link to my channel will be in the description below. And today we will be creating this snow bunny jar illustration in Procreate. So a few things before we get started. There is a link to the color palette below, and all of the brushes that we'll be using are default brushes that are included with the app. My canvas is 2400 by 3000 pixels, and a few settings for the canvas once you have it set up. So I'm tapping this wrench icon and going to Preferences, and under Pressure and Smoothing, my stabilization is 31%. And then under the same wrench icon, I'm setting up a drawing guide. So under the Canvas tab, Drawing Guide, Edit Drawing Guide, Symmetry, and under Options, I'm choosing Vertical. Okay, and then tap Done, and we are ready to begin this illustration. So for our first layer, we are just going to drag and drop the color to fill the entire canvas. So I'm choosing this dark gray, almost black color, and dragging it right to the canvas and filling the entire page. Create a new layer and double tap that layer to turn on Drawing Assist from the little pop-up menu. And then we are going to select the light blue color from this palette and create the jar. So there are just a couple times throughout the video where the colors are a little bit hard to see on the screen. So I'm putting the color palette on the bottom left corner here, just in case that is useful as a reference. So I'm using the Studio pen, starting at the top of the left side, maybe about a third or a quarter of the way into the page, going down a little bit, and then going all the way out almost to the edge of the canvas to create a pretty wide jar shape, connecting it on the top. And I am using the, again, light blue shade from this palette. It kind of looks white on the screen right now, but you can really use any colors that you'd like. I just wanted to make that clear. Okay, so this jar shape that we have created this layer is going to be a sort of like a stencil or a guide as we create the rest of the project. And we're going to use it to make sure that when we want to fill up our jar with the snow and different elements, that we only draw it inside of that shape. So I'm swiping left on that layer to duplicate it and turning off the bottom of those two layers. And we're just going to save that, like I mentioned. And then we have our second layer here, the one that we've kept on, and we're going to turn off Drawing Assist on that layer by double tapping on it and turning off Drawing Assist. And then we are going to select our eraser with the soft brush and start gently erasing from the center of this jar, working our way out. I am using the side of my pencil and gentle pressure, and I'm pretty much fully erasing the very center of the jar and going less so towards the edges. Okay, so now I am going back to that other jar layer, the one we have turned off, and I am going to select that by double tapping on it and choosing Select from the pop-up menu. And then I am going to create a new layer, and on this new layer, since our other jar is selected, we will only be able to draw in that jar shape. So I'm using the same light blue that we originally created this jar in, and I am choosing my flat brush, and I am just going around the outside edge of the entire jar shape. So back to the color palette, I am selecting the dark gray color, the same as our background, but I am reducing the opacity, and then I'm going around the jar again. And finally repeat with the dark green from the palette. And once that is all complete, I am going back to that layer, tapping on the N and moving the opacity slider down to reduce the opacity of that whole layer. And that is the layer that we erased, the second jar layer. And now I'm going to create a new layer for the highlight. I'm using the flat brush and white. I'm just drawing a line down the left side of the jar. And then selecting my eraser with the soft brush and gently erasing either side of that highlight. And this sort of blends it in and makes the edges not so harsh. Okay, and then reduce the size of the eraser, and I'm zooming in to erase 3 straight lines through the top of that highlight. Okay, I'm going to reduce the opacity of that highlight layer by tapping the N and moving the slider down. And then I'm going to create one more layer for highlights, this time using the Studio Pen and keeping the white. And then I'm going to draw a straight line, or just following the shape of the jar, down the right side, left side, and across the top. Then I'm grabbing the eraser one more time, doing the same thing as before, and just erasing the edges of each of those highlights. And that is it for our jar. We are all done. We can now start filling it up with our snow and our bunny and our little winter scene. So you may still have it selected from before, but if it's not, you want to double tap on our kind of jar guide layer and select that again. So now we are only drawing inside of that jar shape. Create a new layer and the light gray shade. It's the second color in the palette from the left. And then the Studio Pen. And I'm drawing a curved line for the snow. All right, now I am going to drag that snow layer behind all of our jar layers, except for the one that is our guide. And then just to make some space and organize a little bit, I'm going to swipe right on all of the jar layers, except for that guide layer that I'm circling there, and going to group them together. So swiping right on all the jar layers and tapping group, and that will just get them out of the way. Okay, going back to my snow layer, I am just filling in the whole bottom of that shape and coloring in all of that snow. Okay, creating a new layer and bringing it behind that snow layer, and this time selecting the bright white from the palette, and then drawing another line across the back of the jar and filling in the rest of the ground. All right, and now it is time to work on our plants. So I'm selecting this medium green from the color palette. I accidentally had it in there twice, so I'm just deleting the repeat. And then I'm using my Studio Pen, and I'm drawing straight lines down, holding my pencil at the end of each line to snap it into place. And I'm going to draw 2 trees on the left and 1 tree on the right. So I'm just drawing 3 green straight lines for the trunks. And then I'm going to zoom in a bit here. And once again, using my Studio Pen, lighter pressure at the base, lighter pressure by the trunk, and then pressing down further as I get out towards each edge. I'm just going to create some little branches. And I'm going to take these maybe halfway or 3/4 of the way down the trunk. And start doing some more little branches coming off of the ones that we already drew. And repeat for the other 2 trees. All right, we are going to create another layer of plants. And this one is going to be some shorter kind of bushes or just sticks with berries on them. So I am using the same green color and still the studio pen. And I'm going to create a V shape to start. And then coming off of that V, a few more straight lines. And again, I'm holding my pencil at the end of the V and the straight lines to snap them straight. And then I'm just drawing, kind of like we did before, more lines coming off of the original branches. And I am overlapping these with our other trees. Okay, and create one more layer, and this is going to be for the berries. So I'm choosing this peach shade, lighter peach shade, and I am going to create some circles on the end of each of these sticks. Okay, next we are creating the moon and stars. So I have another new layer, and I am using the bright white, and still using my little studio pen, I am going to create a circle by drawing a circle shape and holding down my pencil at the end so it snaps into place, and then holding a finger down as well to make it a perfect circle. Fill in that circle shape, and then using my eraser set as the studio pen, I'm going to draw and hold my pencil down at the end, a curved line, and then I can move my pencil around to adjust that line, and that will help me create a crescent shape for my moon. And once I have the initial shape created, I can erase the rest of that circle. Okay, I want to fix the angle of my moon, so I'm tapping on the arrow tool to select it, and then just rotating it and adjusting it to right where I want in the sky. And now for the stars, create one more new layer, and using the light pen, I'm just going to create a bunch of dots all throughout the sky using varied amounts of pressure so that some are smaller and some are larger. I am creating some little clusters of stars closer together as well. All right, we are finally ready for our little bunny. So he's going to be right here, sort of in the center of the jar, and I'm going to use my 6B pencil and the light blue shade to sketch him out before we fill in the main shape. So to sketch the bunny, I'm drawing an oval, sort of angled towards the moon. And then I'm going to flatten out the bottom of that oval. draw a little tail, and then another oval facing the same direction as the first one for the bunny's head, smaller oval for the bunny's head, and then 2 ear shapes going back. Right sort of in line with that ear is the bunny's eye. So now that we have our shape sketched out, oh, okay, I just realized that I forgot to draw a new or create a new layer for the bunny. So to fix that, I am going to take my select tool up here, circle just the bunny shape, swipe down with 3 fingers, cut and paste, and now our bunny is on its own layer. And just like with the moon, I am using the arrow to select and rotate my bunny and place him exactly where I want. And then creating a new layer, I am selecting gray from the color palette, the same color that is the front section of our snow. And I'm using the studio pen to just go around the full bunny shape. So I'm just doing one solid shape for the whole bunny. And I am just flattening out his body even more on the bottom there, kind of making it almost like a triangle. And once we have our bunny shape, we can turn off the sketch. Creating a new layer above that. This is for the bunny's eye. So I'm selecting the dark gray color from the palette and right in line with that ear, doing his eye. And then I'm selecting the lighter peach shade from the palette and sort of right in line with the eye, I'm drawing his nose. Okay, so this is our full composition and we are now ready to shade. And we've actually already shaded our jar, so we're ready to shade everything on the inside. Okay, and we're going to start with the plants. So I'm going to the tree layer, and then I am creating 2 new layers above that. And I'm double tapping on each one and making them clipping masks. Then on the first clipping mask, the one that's closer to the trees, I am tapping on the N and sliding the blend mode up to multiply. And on the second clipping mask, I am tapping that N and sliding the blend mode down to overlay. And this is kind of the process that I'm going to be using for most of the different things that I'll be shading. So now I'm selecting the dark green from the color palette and flat brush, and working my way up from the bottom, I am just using the side of my pencil to apply some shadows to the trunk and sides of the tree that are further away from the moon. So the left side for the left trees and the right side for the right tree. Going to that overlay clipping mask and selecting the lighter green shade from the color palette, and then going and applying some of that right to the sides of the trees that are closer to the moon. And then I'm grabbing white from the color palette and applying some of that just right to the very edge of each tree. All right, and we're going to repeat the same process for the branches down here. So I'm creating 2 new layers above those branches and then making them both clipping masks by double tapping and selecting clipping mask from the pop-up menu. Tapping on the N of that first clipping mask, the one that's closer to the branches, and sliding up to multiply. and then tapping on the N of the second clipping mask and sliding it up to overlay. And just like before, we are starting with the multiply clipping mask and the darker green shade and adding some shadow to the bottom of these sticks. Now I'm realizing that my sticks aren't connected here, so I'm just fixing that really quick. And then I am going to go to that overlay clipping mask and choose my lighter green shade and add some brightness to the top of each of these sticks. I am switching over to my studio pen to shade the berries. So I am creating 2 layers above these berries and making the first one a clipping mask, second one a clipping mask, and then I'm setting that first clipping mask to multiply. So again, this is the one closer to the berries, and the second clipping mask I'm just going to leave as normal. So working first on the multiply layer, and I'm selecting this darker peach shade, and I'm just going to draw a curved line with the studio pen to create a shadow along the bottom of each of these berries. All right, and going to that second clipping mask, the one that's left as normal blend mode, and selecting white from the palette, I'm just going to use the studio pen again to create a little highlight along the top area of each berry. All right, next we are going to add some color to our sky. So I'm going down to this initial background layer that we made, should be layer 1 or right above the sort of built-in background that Procreate has. And I'm creating a layer above that, tapping the N and sliding down to the color dodge blend mode. And then I'm choosing this bright pink from the color palette, the soft brush, reducing the opacity of that brush down to about 50%, very gently starting from the moon and working my way out with the most pressure and saturation right at the moon and just getting lighter and fading out as I go. Moving on to the little bunny. So I am going up to the bunny layer, adding 4 layers above that, and I'm going to double tap on each one to choose clipping mask from the pop-up menu. So I'm going to be creating 4 clipping masks above the bunny. And then I am going to that first clipping mask, the one closest to the bunny, and setting it to multiply. The second one is our overlay. The third one and the fourth one I am just leaving as normal. So starting with the normal clipping mask, the first one that's furthest away from the bunny, I am choosing this lighter peach color, and I'm going to create some pink centers of his ears. So I'm going back to my studio pen and just following the shape of the ear along the bottom. And then if needed, like I did, you can just clean up any spots that went outside the lines. Okay, so going to the multiply clipping mask, which is the one closest to the bunny, and this is for our shadows. So I am selecting the same gray as the base color, and I'm using the flat brush, and I'm just going to go along the bottom of the bunny and the back and anywhere that we want there to be some shadow. And I like to increase the size of my brush and kind of go over these same areas again. And I am keeping the same gray color with the same multiply layer, but I'm going to my studio pen and I'm using that to just draw where the bunny's leg would be meeting the body. Okay, so moving on to the overlay clipping mask. This is going to be for our highlights, and I'm going to select the pure white, and using the flat brush again, just start creating some brightness in the middle of the bunny's body, his face, and that top ear. I'm adding some extra highlights along the top of the bunny's head and ear. Finally adding some white to the tail. But I am making sure to keep some of that gray shadow around the very edge of the tail so that it still pops from the snow and has that round shape. Okay, and on our final clipping mask, this is my favorite part, adding the little spots and speckles. I'm using my studio pen with the darkest gray, and I'm just going to use varied pressure and go around making a few spots along the bunny's back, head, and ears. And I'm starting off at full opacity, and then I am going to reduce the opacity and add some more spots. And reduce again. And just keep on doing that, overlapping and changing up the size through the pressure. And then going to the layer with the eye and the nose, and using the studio pen, adding a white highlight to the eye and across the top of the nose. And finally, I'm going back to that inside of the ear layer, and I am swiping right with 2 fingers on that layer. That puts it into alpha lock, so now we can only draw inside of that shape. I am selecting the flat brush with the darker peach shade, and then I'm just going along the bottom of each of these inside ear sections to add some shadow. And that is the last step for our bunny, but at this point I took a look at the whole little guy and I felt like he needed just some more shadow along certain sections. So I am going back to that multiply layer and adding just a little more contrast, a little more shadow underneath the bunny's chin. I am even going in kind of a little bit along where the neck would be to show some separation between the neck and the body. And then I'm just adding some more shadow again along the back. And I have my brush at a lower opacity here, so this helps the shadows build gradually and prevents it from getting too intense. Okay, we are almost done. The last thing we need to do is add some shadow beneath the bunny. So I'm going back to that top layer of snow and creating a new layer above that. And then I am using the multiply blend mode and our light gray color with the flat brush. And I'm just going to go along gently side of my pencil with right underneath where the bunny is sitting. And that is it for this one. So I'm adding my signature and it is all done. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you to Joel for having me on. I really appreciate it. If you did follow along and created this piece, I would absolutely love to see it. You can share it with me on Instagram at ZeraCatStudio. And if you have any questions at all, please do not hesitate to reach out. Okay, thanks again, everyone, and take care.